Welcome, everyone. This is my first GovCon, and it's under interesting circumstances thanks to COVID. So hopefully everything goes well. My last presentation, as a small anecdote, my computer shut down midway, so I'm monitoring my battery life to make sure that doesn't happen. If you guys want to follow along with the slides, I've put a bit.ly link, so bit.ly/recurring-events, and you guys can read along as I talk, I guess. So without further ado, today I'm going to talk about the recurring events module that I built as part of working for Interpersonal Frequency, who you may have you heard from our CEO in the keynote just a while ago. I'll tell you a little bit about me. I'll tell you about events management as it currently stands in Drupal 8 and 9. I'll tell you why I created something new, because that's kind of an important part of the whole journey. And I'll go into some of the key functionalities and concepts of the module and its current status and availability, and then I'll hand over the mic to questions. So who am I? I'm Owen Bush. I am the development team lead at Interpersonal Frequency. I have 7 or 8, I can't remember the exact date, but I have 7 or 8 years of Drupal experience. I'm a back-ender by trade. I didn't necessarily have the chops for front end. And I live northeast of Denver, Colorado. And if you want to reach out to me personally, you can find me on LinkedIn, GitHub, and Drupal.org, all with Owen Bush as the handle. So, events management as it currently stands in Drupal 8, and I'm sure most of you who are here know some of this or have experienced some of this, but there are options. There are lots of options, which is one of the greatest parts of the Drupal community, is there's so many ways to do so many things. Drupal core itself offers date and date range fields, which you can use to create pretty simplistic events. Recurring events is difficult like this. You would have to clone your nodes and things like that, but it's doable, especially for smaller runs of events. There's the Smart Date module, which I've been keeping a close eye on because I think it offers some really great enhancements for an improved experience with dates and date ranges and date formats, and it has recurring date support too. The date recur module, that really became for me the de facto standard of recurring date modules in D7. I'm not actually sure of the status in D8. I'm pretty sure there's a version of it, but very flexible and used by a lot of sites. I know that. Then there's node clone. You could simply create a node that has a date and then clone it and change the date and then clone it and change a date, and effectively you have a recurring event. And then there's also RNG, which is a really comprehensive event and registration system. There's probably more that I've missed, and if one of them is your modules, I apologize profusely, but I can't possibly cover everything. So why another way? The story of the recurring events module really started out with a client of ours at Interpersonal Frequency. They're a library client, and they wanted a way of managing events where each instance of an event could be modified. So if you think about maybe the date of a particular event needs to change, but you don't want to affect the other events in that series. Maybe all of the events in a particular series are taking place in a particular room in that library or at a specific location, but this one cannot because the room is booked, or this one cannot because there's been a natural disaster and the room is being refurbished or whatever. There's a multitude of reasons why individual instances in an overall series might be slightly different. And the problem we found with most of the aforementioned modules is that they don't really allow that sort of thing. Date recur, for example, you can't really modify a specific instance. You can't say that this one is in this location or is at this slightly different time. And so that was really the crux of the issue for us. And so we set about building a custom module for them. But that did not satisfy the Drupal contributor inside of me. I wanted to contribute back. So I rebuilt the module, the custom module, in a more agnostic way. And doing that allowed me to rethink the architecture. It allowed me to focus on extensibility. It allowed me to make sure that the module could be used for not just libraries, it could be used for dental surgeries. It could be used for, we have some schools that are using it for parent-teacher conferences. So it really allowed us to be flexible. So some of the key functionality of the recurring events module, it's a zero configuration module if you want it to be. You can install it, you can be up and running, you can have a recurring event within minutes. But it doesn't have to be. There's plenty of configuration options, there's plenty of things that we can do. And I'll go into a little bit of that in a moment, but there's one contrib module dependency and there's two core module dependencies. We really wanted to make sure that you didn't have to have views, for example. You didn't have to have any particular module, core module or contrib module, and we reduced those down as much as we possibly could. Now, mentioning views, it is all views compatible, and there is a sub-module you can enable which will replace any listings of events with views. So you can use views if you want, but you don't have to. The events, there are three types of entity effectively in the module. There's an event series, there's an event instance, and there's a registrant. Event series and instances are revision, content moderation, translation, and views compatible. So you can translate your events into whatever language. You can set up whatever content moderation workflows you require for your events. It's also extremely granular when it comes to permissions. There are 30 custom permissions, well, 30 plus, and that's growing every time we add more functionality to the module. And there's also over 20 custom hooks. So you can, a developer can go in and they can modify the output or the particular inner workings of the module without having to hack the module or hack core or anything like that. So one of the main functionalities is the difference between a series and an instance. There's a distinct separation. So you would, as a content editor or an events manager or whatever your title happens to be, you create event series. You don't create event instances. Event instances are automatically created when an event series is created. So you would go in, you would set up the recurrence pattern, as we call it. You would say, I want this event to recur every week on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and the system will automatically generate the associated event instances. The benefit, as I mentioned earlier, to that approach is you can then customize and modify and override those event instances. You can delete them if you want. If there's one day where you just cannot, run that event and you need to cancel just that event, you can remove it. It's pretty simple. Series, instances, and registrants are bundleable. So you could have different types of events. And as a result, they're also fieldable. In terms of registrations, you can configure registration to be for the entire series. And a good example of that would be, let's say there's a 6-lesson computer course being run, and you have to go to all 6 in order to get your accreditation or whatever it happens to be. You could set up in that instance, you could set up the events to be a series registration. Alternatively, you can say, you know what, you don't need to go to all of these events. You can just go to one. Maybe it's, I use the example a lot because this was built with libraries in mind, but it's usable for anyone. But a story time that gets particularly popular. You want to make sure you go on this Wednesday, but you don't necessarily want to go every Wednesday. So you could register just for that instance. And as a result, there's also automatic data inheritance from the series to the instance. What I mean by that is when you create the series, you give the series a title. Owen Bush's Great Event. That title is then inherited down to all of the instances in that series. So if you then change it, you decide this isn't such a great event, Owen's terrible event, those changes would automatically cascade down to all of the instances, and you wouldn't have to then go back and change 100, 200, whatever instances to get that updated. Looks like, sorry if I pronounce wrong, but Mashana has asked, series is a class, instance is a session held on a specific date. To a degree, yeah. A series is a wrapper, a container that holds instances that are part of that series, and an instance is a specific date that someone would attend. So in reality, you probably would be looking at the instances in a calendar or in a list view. You're probably not going to look at the series unless there's a specific reason to do that. But yes, an instance is effectively a single date and time that someone would be able to attend. Conrad has asked, can you attach unique information to the date instance? Absolutely you can, and I will be talking a bit more about that in a moment. I put these screenshots in here, but they're kind of boring. They're just views, but you can see up here on the top left, it's pretty blurry, I guess. The font's pretty small. I created an event called My Recurring Event. It's a daily event, and there are 22 instances. Oops, let's go back. Scroll wheel is not my friend. And then on the bottom here, we have the event instances, and you can see they all have the same event name. You can override that, and I'll explain that shortly. You can view the series, and you can see the specific date and time that event instance is taking place. So data inheritance, and hopefully this will answer Conrad's question. I used a field inheritance module. That is a module that I also wrote and was originally part of the custom recurring events module, but I pulled it out and I contributed it back as its own thing because it has use cases outside of events. And what it allows you to do is display specific data from the series on the instance. So a good example might be you add an image field to your series. You want that image to appear on all of your instances in that series. However, let's say maybe there's going back to the story time example I've used earlier. Let's say that's an author's coming in and they're going to read their own book. Maybe you want to update the description. Maybe you want to update the image just for that specific instance. So with data inheritance, you can actually choose to, and there's 4 ways of doing this, inherit data from the series. That basically just takes data straight from the series and displays it on the instance. Title is a good example. You can prepend, so you could have a field on your instance that, for example, additional description. You have an additional description field on the series. You want to put that before the series description when someone is looking at the event. The other way of doing it is append, you put it at the end, you put it after the series description. And then the final way of inheriting data is a fallback. And a fallback would allow you to have an image field, for example, on the instance. And if you populate that field, if you add a specific image to the instance, it will display that rather than the one on the series. So it gives you a lot of flexibility to override or extend data and field data that is on the series and pull it down into the instance. Because series is, that can't be a word, but because the plural of the word series, instances, and registrants are all fieldable, you absolutely can add your own fields to an instance and add custom unique information to the date. So hopefully that answers Conrad's question. Finally, this works with any field, at least every field we've tried so far: texts, images, taxonomy term, lists, text areas, paragraphs. We've got field inheritance working for all of those things. If there are fields that don't work, the system for inheriting is actually pluggable. So someone could write a new plugin which would allow us to inherit data from a different field type. So in terms of recurrence, like what sort of recurrence can we do with this module? We've set out 5 different ways of recurring, but again, these things are pluggable. You want to add a new one, you can add a new one. It's the process of adding a new type of recurrence is actually relatively simple. But we have consecutive events, and a consecutive event are the most recently added recurrence type. It allows you to do things like appointments. So we had as I mentioned earlier, a school. The school were really interested in being able to do parent-teacher bookings. So you could effectively have multiple events in one day, and someone would be able to register for a particular slot with the teacher. It allows you also to have a buffer between those, because you never really want to be bumping right up against each other. So you could have a 15-minute or 20, let's say a 20-minute event with a 10-minute buffer. So effectively every 30 minutes throughout the day, there will be an event. And those, you can do the buffer and the event length can be specified in seconds, minutes, hours. Don't think we do days because that doesn't quite make sense. But then we have daily. Daily is effectively a very simple way of just saying every day. It's the equivalent of a weekly event where every day of the week is checked. But with a weekly event, you have checkboxes for every day of the week, and you can specify on which day of the weeks will these events take place. Monthly is slightly more complicated because there's 2 distinct ways of creating a monthly recurrence. The first one is simply the date of the month. So you might want an event that takes place on the 1st of every month, or the last day of every month, or for some reason the 14th of every month. And the second way of doing it is what we call a weekday occurrence, because I just couldn't think of a better way of phrasing it because words are hard. And a weekday occurrence is, I want this event to take place on the 3rd and 5th, or 3rd and 4th, or 1st and 2nd Monday and Tuesday of every month. Finally, the last way of setting up a recurrence type is a custom or one-off unstructured recurrence. Maybe it's an event that takes place on March 20th, 2020, and then suddenly randomly also on August 1st. There's no structure to that recurrence. There's no way you can figure out a pattern to that, really. So it's a patternless recurrence event, and it's just a date picker. So you say this date and time, this date and time, this date and time, and then you have your events. Here's an example. One thing I want to mention, the styling is deliberately completely unopinionated. There's no styling done because, in our opinion, styling it should be controlled from the theme. It should not be dictated necessarily from the module. So it's bare bones. It's deliberately bare bones. It looks like what Drupal would spit out if you added these fields independently. So this is an example of a consecutive event. You see, you can create events between 2 particular dates. The first event of the day starts at 8 a.m. The last event starts at 11:30. This particular event is very short, 5 minutes, and there's no buffer. But as you can see, you have flexibility to tweak and change these things. Excluded and included dates are also part of this, of the module on both a global and a series basis. So globally, you can say, configure particular dates or date ranges when no event should take place. Equally, if you're more positive and you look at the glass half full, you can configure dates when events can take place. You can do both. You can mix and match. Gets a little confusing, but you can also do it on a per series basis, and you can say, for this particular series, I don't want any events in June, for example, or I only want events in June. So yeah, 2 examples. Only allow events to be created during summer months. That would be a good example for maybe a higher education establishment that students aren't there, so we don't want to create events during that time, or something like that. And another example, do not allow events to be created during the month of December. I don't know why anyone would do that, but hey, it's flexible enough that it will allow you. Next big piece of functionality is registration. And registration is actually in a separate submodule. It's all bundled together, but you can enable or disable registration as you wish. Registrants are fieldable, so you can collect different data for each type of event. If you have an event where you need to know the participant's age or some other field, you can add that field to the registrant and you can collect that at registration time. Out of the box, the registrant comes with 4 fields, 3 of which can be removed and 1 of which is fixed. The 3 which can be removed are the first name, last name, and telephone number. And the one which cannot be removed at this time but could be hidden is the email field. You can customize confirmation emails for registrants. Using tokens, you can send registrants particular emails at particular times, and I'll show a screenshot of that in a moment. You can also enable or disable anonymous or authenticated registration. There is a permission that allows you to allow anonymous users to register. You can specify capacities on a per series and a per instance basis. That depends on the registration type. If it's a series registration, the capacity applies across the series. If it's an instance registration, the capacity is on an individual instance basis. You can also enable waitlisting. And if the capacity is reached for a particular event, people will automatically get added to the waitlist. And if people cancel their registration, they will be automatically promoted from that waitlist to the registration list. So if a space frees up and you're waiting, then you will be promoted. You can also have scheduled or open registration, which means you can specify when registration opens for the series or the instances, or you can just open it, leave it open until the event starts. So here's an example of the event registration configuration. Oops, I do not like scroll wheels, I'm telling you. You can enable registration. You can specify whether it's an individual event registration or an entire series. You can specify whether it's open registration or scheduled. If it's scheduled, you can specify when it opens and when it closes, and the capacity and the waiting list. And this screen shows the notifications that get sent out. If someone registers and they get added to the registration list, we can send out a notification and you can turn it on and off if you want to. If someone gets added to a wait list, you can have a different notification. If they get promoted from the wait list, you can have a different notification. If the instance that someone has registered for gets removed, you could send out a notification. If the series that someone has registered for has been removed, you can send out a notification. Equally, if the instance or series have been modified. And again, these notifications are pluggable. If there's something else you want to do, you want to trigger an event, an email at some other point, you would have to write code, but you could write a plugin to allow an extra type of notification. So looks like I'm doing okay on time because I want to leave plenty of time for Q&A. You can find the module at drupal.org/project/recurring events. The latest releases are an 8 branch, 1.0 beta 1, and a semantic versioning branch, which is 2.0.0 beta 1. They are both Drupal 8 and 9 compatible. And at some point, I will probably deprecate the 1.0 branch in favor of the semantic versioning branch. But for the time being, they're both being maintained, and they're actually exactly the same at this point. They're just different tags. You might be wondering, why is this not stable? There is a core issue related to views and field inheritance. There's an issue against core to get that patched, but it's not there yet. There's a patch, but it's not merged. So I feel wrong, given that field inheritance is a required dependency of the module. It doesn't feel right to me to launch a stable release of the module when I know there's this glaring core issue that if you don't have this particular patch, views don't quite work with field inherited data. The patch does work. I've tested it. It's just not quite merged yet, and I'm hoping it will get into the Drupal 9.1, at which point I can then release a stable release. I'm also working on some other things behind the scenes. I'm working on some registration statuses. So you would be able to say that a registration is still pending. This is key for getting us to the point of being able to pay for registrations, which is a feature that people have been requesting, but there's certain steps I need to take before we can get there. So registration statuses are coming. There's also a couple of other things. People are requesting different ways of recurring, maybe being able to say, create an event every other week or every 3 weeks. Issues, suggestions, and patches are super welcome. When someone else contributed the first patch to the module, that made me feel pretty good. So please help if you want to. And there's also Drupal.org Slack channel, recurring_events, which I'm in, and you can ask me questions or anything like that. So yeah, I'm happy to answer some questions now. As I said, the slides are.
Yep, I can start from the top if you want.
Yeah, sure.
I'm going to start. Okay. So, and you got a lot of questions. So Conrad asked, can you attach unique information to your date instance? Did you already address that? If you did, like, finish the question, just say so, because we have so many questions.
Yeah, I think I addressed that for Conrad.
Okay, cool. Joanne asks, so you can register for the series or for one instance of the series, right? You probably have a max number for the series, true? If yes, so first, does that sound right? Okay. So you can either register for the series or for one instance of the series. Is that correct? And
that is correct.
Yeah. Okay.
And the way it works is, if you effectively are always registering for an instance, you're not really, the concept of the module is not really to ever let someone go to view the series, because the series data doesn't tell you necessarily when the event takes place, because it's calculated from the recurrence patterns. So when someone goes to an instance, the system knows whether that instance is part of a series that has series registration or instance registration, and it will register you either for the series or the instance, depending on what the configuration is. At this point, there's no limit on the number of times a user can register for a particular series or instance. You could register as many times as you want. However, the capacity will prevent people from registering more than there is space. So if there's a capacity of 10 for the entire series, when you register for any of the instances, you're registering for the entire series, and that number, that 10, will be subtracted until there's no more spaces. So I think that
so, and it says if one person, okay, yep, that was the rest of her question there. So Conrad asks, as the administrator, can you decide which type of these types are available to the content creators? I think that was probably related to something specific you had said at that moment in time. Sorry, Conrad. I
think
wrote the question, but
whether you could say only particular users can create particular types of event. If so,
yeah,
not a good question. I don't think so. But if that's a requirement, absolutely submit an issue, and we'll take a look at that and see if we can get that in there. That should be a case of just adding some more permissions, I imagine, and making it a bit more granular. But at this time, I don't think so.
Conrad says, probably on this question, he said, like if we wanted to keep our team from creating a monthly event.
Right, okay. So you can turn on and off any of the event types. So if you don't want consecutive events in the event series settings with the module, you can just uncheck that as an option. It won't be available. Now that applies across the board. It won't apply to just specific users. It will be for everyone. But yeah, you can, because those event recurrence pattern fields are plugins, you can say, I don't want this one enabled, and no one will be able to do that.
Okay. Sarah CK asks, can you create users from registrants?
At this time, no. Anonymous registration is kind of interesting because the emails that get sent out for editing or canceling your registration, typically what you do in Drupal is, because the registration is associated with your account, you can just send someone to like registrant/1/edit or something like that. But the problem with those, the number one in that path is that it's an auto increment, so you could guess someone else's registrant ID and then delete them. Not a good idea. So the way anonymous registration works is it actually uses it should be impossible to guess string of characters in the email that gets sent out only to anonymous users. So we don't, at this point, register someone on Drupal for registering for an event, because I can see that being a good use case, but it's not one that we encountered when we were building the module. So at this time, no, but I can see that being a possibility. It doesn't seem like it would be too difficult to add an option to say, allow users to register for Drupal when they register. But just at this time, it's not possible.
Cool. So Mashana asks, are confirmation and reminder emails available?
Confirmation emails, yes. Where is it? Somewhere here. Yeah, so all these email notifications are effectively confirmations of something happening. So you registered, you will get a registration email. You were promoted from the waitlist, you will get a promotion email. The series has been deleted, you will be informed. There's no reminder emails yet, and I've been pondering this one for a while and the best way to do it, because I don't really know. It feels to me like a reminder email would be very specific, probably, or could be very specific to the event for which you've registered. The date in which it gets sent out might be different. But there is a way to contact all registrants of an event and send them an email. I haven't screenshotted that, but so you could go to, if you've created an event and there are 10 people registered, you can contact all 10 of those people at once, and you could manually send a reminder email. But there's no automated reminder emails at this point.
Okay. Mashana also asked, how can someone cancel the registration and will they be notified?
Yes, so
I'm not sure if she meant, will you be notified as the owner, or if she meant the person after they, but either way.
As a user, and it applies for both anonymous and authenticated users who register, you will receive an email, and within that email you will receive, you can see here, a modify your registration link and a delete your registration link. So you could do that directly from the email. You click a link and you can cancel your registration. Also, as an authenticated user, when you log into to Drupal, and you're on your My Account page, and at the top of the My Account page, you have tabs, and those tabs are like, you can edit your profile and you can view your profile. There's a new tab for registrations, which will show everything you've registered for and will allow you to edit or delete from a list there too. I think that answered that question.
Carl asked, thanks for creating the module. And he says, are there any issues for Drupal 9? I have a site running on that. I have it running on a site that will hopefully be moving soon. Sorry. I think that might have been before you said it was Drupal 9 compatible, but do you have any like gotchas or warnings that you want to share? If not, I can go to the
What I will say is it is Drupal 9 compatible asterisk, in the sense we've tested it on Drupal 9. We do quite a lot of our testing on simplytest.me, and we spun it up with Drupal 9. I have it running locally on Drupal 9. It seems stable enough. There have been a couple of things that have tripped us up, and we have had specific D9 patches committed to the repository, but at this point I'm pretty comfortable saying it's there or thereabouts for D9. I'm pretty sure it's workable, and if it's not, if you find anything, let me know, we'll get it resolved.
Cool. Rudy asked 3 questions in a row. So, does it support time zone settings?
At this point, all events are in the site's default time zone. Time zones are tricky, and we have had a lot of time zone issues with the module during development, but they seem to have stabilized. So the event will be in the site's default time zone, but the event times will be displayed in the user's time zone. So if the event is in Central and you live in Pacific, you will see the event time in Pacific. But you cannot at this point say, I want this event to be at 12 Central. It will be at 12, whatever time zone the site is using.
As opposed to like when Drupal, yeah.
Again, if you want that as a feature, absolutely submit an issue, and I'll be happy to add that sort of thing and make this thing as flexible as possible for everyone.
Cool. His second question is, I'm not sure.
The redo.
It says redo. Yeah.
I think I understand. If that is asking you already have an event node, will you need to recreate the event? And this will also go to the next question, rewrite all event views needed. Yes. This is the events are a brand new entity type. They are not nodes. They are their own entity type, and there are various reasons for that. But mostly, the biggest reason, it gives us a lot of flexibility to add relationships between events and event series and event instances. It allows us to tie together event types with registrant types and things like that. So at this point, if you have events in your current site, yes, it would be a redo, and the event views would all need to change because it is a new entity type.
Cool. Conrad asks, can you set permissions to who can manage registrations? Like anyone with a role of main library can manage registrations for an instance created by someone with that role.
Yes. So, part of the there's loads of, last time I counted, it was 30 permissions or 35 or something. There's loads of permissions, and a bunch of them relate specifically to registrations. Things like who can change whether a registrant is on the waiting list. That's a permission that you could hand out to only select few. Who can create registrants? Again, you could say only anonymous people can create registrants, or only authenticated people can create registrants. And then there's the more admin side of things. Who can manage those registrations? Who can delete them? Who can edit them? So yes, you could, if someone had a role of main library, they could manage registrations, if providing
Cool.
the permission has been assigned to that role.
Cool. And then Ryan asked about the core patch, which I did post, but I just want to verify there were 2 listed on the field inheritance project page.
Yes.
So that's what you meant. Okay, cool.
So I think on the order they're on the field inheritance page, the top one is the one we need patched. The second one, there was actually a workaround I did within field inheritance itself. So it works. It's just when that patch eventually lands, I haven't checked if it has yet, but if it eventually lands, we can roll back some of the changes we made in field inheritance to fix that issue.
Cool. And then Conrad asked, and this is the last one that's in the chat right now. Can you duplicate? Oh, we have 2 more.
Okay.
Can you duplicate? No, it's great. Can you duplicate a set of instances? If someone wanted to copy activity from October and do it again in December, could you copy all the associated information to then set a new date of to set up a new set of date instances? Sorry.
Yes. The answer is yes. There are 2 types of cloning in the module. I didn't even mention cloning, so thank you, Conrad. You can clone an entire series, and what it does is it basically opens a new, create a new series admin form, and it pre-populates the series with exactly the settings that were in the previous one. So if you're trying to clone something from October to December, you would clone the October event. It would populate the form with all the settings that October event had. Then you just tweak the date ranges and save it, and then you've got a new event. Well, then you've got the December events. And on the other side of it, let's say that you're running a 10 event series, and it turns out to be super popular, and you're like, you know what, I want another event at the end of this. It's been so popular, people are missing out. I can't let that happen. They have to go to this event. You can go and clone an instance, specify a different date, and then you can basically add instances to an existing series without affecting anything else.
Very cool. So then is this moderation compatible?
Yes. So it is content moderation and workflows compatible at this point, for event series and event instances. So you can actually, this was a complication, but as an example, you might not want to publish the event instances until someone has reviewed the series. That might be your workflow. So at the point that someone publishes the event series, the system can go and automatically publish all the events in that series. So you don't have to sit there and manually click through 150 events and publish them all. But it's compatible with workflows. If you have particular transition states and stuff like that you want to include, yes, it's an entity, it's a publishable entity that is compatible. And I'm working on getting that into registrants right now, as I said, to get us to the point where maybe we could have paying for registrations become a reality. Because at the moment, once you create a registrant, you're going to the event. But in reality, if you have to, there's like an asynchronous step of going to pay for an event. And at what is the status of your registration during the time where you haven't yet paid for it? It should be pending, it shouldn't be completed. So I'm working on getting registration statuses and getting it compatible with moderation workflows and stuff like that.
That's great. So we are at time. We had 2 questions we didn't get to.
I'm happy to hang around.
Yeah, we have 2 questions we didn't get to, so we'll put it, we'll put them in Slack. Conrad and Uri, if you want to put your questions into Slack, or I can paste them in if you'd like. Yeah, that's it. We're at time. Thank you so much, Owen.
Yeah, thank you everyone for being here.
Thank you everyone.